Hey folks, my name is Andy Sido, and you're listening to another episode of Middle Class Rockstar. My guest today is singer-songwriter and multi-instrumentalist AJ Croce. Hey there, welcome back. We're on episode 70-something. In fact, this might be episode 75, which is sort of a landmark, isn't it? I remember right when I started these, I said, if I get to 10, yes, this is going to be episode 75. Oh my gosh. I said, if I get to 10, then I'll get to 100. So if I get to 100, I don't know what that means. Does that mean I'm going to get to 250? Does that mean I retire? I don't know. I haven't made a penny off the podcast yet, so I suppose I can't retire. But anyway, this is episode 75. And there's been as I look through, it's just kind of crazy looking through the list of all the conversations and say, oh yeah, that one. Oh yeah, that one. The last 2 weeks, I just finished up a two-parter with Leftover Salmon. I had a conversation with Drew Emmett 2 weeks ago and then Greg Garrison last week regarding their brand new album, Brand New Good Old Days. I guess that was redundant, but the album's called Brand New Good Old Days. And Greg Garrison, the bass player and producer on the record, was one of my college professors too, so it was great getting to catch up with him. So after you're done with this one, go back and listen to those. In terms of today's episode, I recorded the monologue right after the interview, and I sent it to mastering, and they said, hey, we were going to upload it, but then there's no monologue. And I said, well, of course there's a monologue. And I went back and looked, and I searched to find the monologue wherever that audio file went, and it was lost in the ether. I don't know if that's ever happened before on this podcast, but my first monologue is gone, so I'm doing a second one and trying to fit it in the same amount of time. Anyway, my guest today is AJ Croce, who I've been wanting to have on for a long time. He has a new album out that came out earlier this year called By Request. It's a great record, and it's all cover songs. All songs that he would play when he was entertaining. Songs like Nothing from Nothing, Only Love Can Break Your Heart, Stay With Me, Brickyard Blues, San Diego Serenade. I'm not going to read off all of them, but just kind of a few that come up off the top of my head. It's a great record. And in our conversation, we talk about how he picked the songs, what his strategy was with producing, because when you do cover songs, you're sort of in that in-between ground of, hey, am I going to do it just like the artist? I want to honor the artist, but I also want to make it unique and make it mine. And AJ did just that on this whole record. But this was just a wonderful conversation all through. I mean, we talk about, he has quite a story. His childhood and his upbringing. He lost his vision when he was just a kid. It came back in one eye gradually. By the time he was about 10, he started playing piano in clubs. As a teenager, he started gigging all the time. He's got some kids of his own. Just a couple years ago, his wife passed away, sadly. We chatted about that a little bit. And we also talk about, briefly what it was like having a father in the same profession who was wildly successful at it in the commercial sense. And he's just very frank about that. He's the son of Jim Croce, and he talks about that, the advantages, disadvantages, whatever, just the reality of it, I guess. But it was a really frank conversation. It's one of my favorite conversations on the podcast so far. It was just honest and talk about all kinds of different things. So I will jump into that in just a second. First, I just want to say, if you'd like to support the podcast in a free way, in a totally free way, just rate and review. Give it a 5-star and a quick review. It takes a couple seconds and helps me out a whole lot. If you are in a position to help in a monetary way, I'm now on Patreon at patreon.com/Andy Sido, SYDOW. And for as little as $3 a month, as Joe Pug would say, that's less than the price of one cup of coffee, you can support this podcast and my music career. I put up exclusive content from these podcasts on there, and I also put up unreleased tracks. of mine. I'm a singer-songwriter and a musician. That's what I do. And that's what all the Patreon funds go towards, is just continuing to do the podcast, continuing to do the music, release the music, whatever it is. I want to mention, too, about AJ. You know, when I first saw him at Dazzle in Denver a few years ago, I was really taken by his piano playing, because I'm a piano songwriter. That's my first instrument. I've done the piano bars and all that, those sorts of things. And it's interesting because as a songwriter, you know, you're always a guitar player. That's, you know, that's what you can bring to the campfire, is a guitar. And so I end up writing most of my songs on the guitar, actually, when I'm a much better piano player. And I think that's because most of my songwriter influences are guitar players. They write on guitar. So seeing AJ play live is a big influence on me. Seeing somebody who's that fluid of a piano player and someone who plays with so much personality, watching him, I went home and wrote a couple songs in the next couple days right after seeing him the first time on the piano. So piano playing songwriters are way cool, and AJ's one of them, and he's absolutely great at it. So anyway, without further ado, let's jump into our conversation. Quick thanks to our sponsors. First, Patrick at PQ Mastering. Patrick puts the finishing touches on this podcast, and for any of your audio or restoration needs, go to pqmastering.com. He'll also let you know if you forgot to put the monologue in. Also, Narrator Music. Go to narratorrf.com for simple and affordable licensing for sync. If you would like to become a sponsor, shoot me an email at middleclassrockstar@gmail.com. Got to sync it for later. AJ, how are you doing? Thanks for coming on.
Oh, I'm doing good. Thank you. I'm visiting California and seeing my kids and my folks for the first time in many, many months, almost 10 months now.
Wow. So where are you living when you're not visiting?
I'm in Nashville.
You're in Nashville now. Okay.
Yeah. I've been there since 2008.
Okay. And so you're getting to visit kids and family and all that?
Yeah. My kids are grown now, but I still miss them, just like when they were little, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. How long are you out there for?
Just for a week.
Okay.
Just for a week.
Nice. And what have you been doing for the last, I ask everybody this, what have you been doing for the last year to, you put out a record, but are you out gigging at all, or, what's it been like?
Just a little bit. Stuff is starting. I think it'll kind of get going more in the summer and fall. It'll probably may get normal by the fall. It's hard to say. I've been doing all kinds of stuff. I've been working on some film projects as a producer, as well as a participant in a couple documentaries. And then also been practicing a ton, piano and guitar, and just having a chance to work on things that I haven't really had a chance to work on since I was young, or had the time to since I was maybe 15.
Right.
Just because usually there's a cycle to doing this for a living, which is, you write, you record, and you tour it. And there may be some little other creative avenues in between that, but you don't have a lot of time to be practicing, Indian ragas and Brazilian, bossa nova and Argentinian tangos and all of that stuff that I've had a chance to do. Also reading and just writing, and it's been great. Honestly, it's been a really expensive vacation, but it's been like a sabbatical.
Yeah, absolutely. And is that part of your daily routine when there's not COVID? Are you a daily practicer, or are you just playing all the time?
Yeah, I practice every day and I write every day, although I'm usually practicing with the idea of writing a song for something that might turn into the next project. So whatever that project is, I'm sort of keeping in mind what's already there and trying to see if it can all live in the same world. And so maybe there's 10 songs or 12 songs, but and there might be a lot to choose from, 25 songs, 30 songs. It could be any number, but I need to sort of whittle it down to something that really fits in the same world on an album, you know?
Yeah.
So even though I practice and I write every day during more normal times, it's quite different because it's sort of project oriented.
Sure. Yeah. No, that makes. I think I'm the same way. It's always. I'm not practicing scales as much as trying to find a song riff or whatever. You know.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, melodies are just. It could be a lyric. It could be a chorus. It could be. Um, I just wrote this song called "Turned Around," which is all these oxymorons that are sort of strung together into a story, and just having the time to put in and think about all of that, not rush it, has given me a better song.
Right.
And also, I've been practicing a lot of guitar, and I got a new guitar during the pandemic, an electric that I was sort of looking for a little more sustain than I had with my electrics, my sort of hollow body
Yeah.
guitars. And so that really changed a few things because I knew that I needed this sound for sustain, and in the process wrote a bunch of stuff that I'm really happy with.
Yeah. And did you buy that for the live show or more for studio stuff? I mean, the times I've seen you in Colorado, at what I guess I think Swallow Hill and Dazzle or
Uh-huh.
Bowers or something,
Yeah.
it's been a duo, and you've been back and forth with acoustic and piano a little bit.
Yeah. So now for the most part, I tour with a full band, 4-piece, and same group that's on the new album by request. Gary
Mhm.
Malaber on drums, and David Berard on bass, and Garrett Stoner on lead guitar.
Okay.
Except when we switch, and I,
Right.
you know, and I go between piano and guitar in the show, and that's been the same band for several years.
Okay.
Obviously, last year was cut short.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. And so this new album, I know we were just talking about daily songwriting, but this new album, uh,
Yeah,
is
yeah,
covers. It's not
it's all
songwriting.
covers. No,
um,
and it's funny because it was recorded in December of 19 and January of 20 with the intention of releasing it last spring, and the idea was that these were songs that sort of reminded me of particular evenings at my house entertaining friends. It was like a house party, and so
yeah.
releasing it this year, this idea of memories with friends was sort of the perfect timing for this story, because it's the thing we haven't been able to do for the last year is hang out with friends and entertain and play music together.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, did the songs sort of pick themselves in that way? Kind of what you were playing when people come over, or did you sit with 30 or 40 covers that you love and whittle it down?
It was part of it was thinking about what my touring band would play well on and improvise well on. Part of it was, having grown up playing jazz and blues and R&B and rock and roll and playing covers in jazz bars and piano bars as a teenager, it was I was no stranger to playing standards, playing covers.
Right.
So I had the American songbook to choose from, but these were songs that reminded me of like fun evenings with friends.
Yeah.
So someone would request the Billy Preston song, and after hanging out and having a few drinks, and I'd play it and I'd sing, and it'd be like it's a night of requests, and
Yeah.
but each one is a different evening over 30 years. It wasn't one particular evening or one friend. It was all different friends from different times in my life that had made these requests.
Yeah. Wow. No, it's a great record. And the artists that you're covering are all over the place. You're right. You had the whole American songbook to choose from, and
Yeah,
it's not limited to any one thing. It's all over, which is great.
it is. It really is. Yeah. Hopefully it sticks together because, well, for one thing, it's live. It's my voice. I'm playing piano or guitar, or harmonium or percussion or something.
Right.
But it sounds like me. So hopefully that's what keeps this thing glued together. And, as I've gotten older, I sort of came to realize that even though I've touched on so many genres in my career and on different albums, it's really my voice that ties it together for me. It's my voice and my piano. Certainly early on, that was what made it. Made all of these varied styles stick together.
Yeah, right. I was when you said "sounds like me," I thought the same thing. Listening to it, and as somebody who plays 3 nights a week in a piano 3 nights a week in a steakhouse, right? I get asked to do all kinds of different songs, and I think about that with covers. You know, what's the intangible of the song, right? What makes the song special? If you're going to do Imagine by John Lennon, you got to have that intro riff in there. Even if it's a techno cover, you got to work that in. But at the same time, we don't want to hear you do it exactly like John Lennon because we can listen to John Lennon do it. So was that a struggle for you at all? Or I mean, production-wise, how did you go about, I want to stay true to the song and honor the song, yet make this completely A.J. Croce?
It happened in different ways. There's a few songs that are really close arrangement wise. And as the producer on this, I took that into account. The reason why they are is for a particular reason, such as someone was sitting in with me and they knew a particular version of it. So like a friend knew a particular version of the Faces song, another friend knew the Flamin' Groovies version of the Have You Seen My Baby by Randy Newman. And so I wanted to pay tribute to Randy Newman, but I wanted that energy of the rock and roll version of the Flamin' Groovies version. So in that, I was like, well, what if Little Richard sat in with the Flamin' Groovies and had his horn section? What would that sound like? And so that's how I did that. With the Beach Boys song "Sail on Sailor," I was thinking about if Chess Records had a psychedelic period.
Yeah.
And so even though all of the melody and all those great chords, that Brian Wilson wrote, and the Beach Boys performed are still there, it starts off sort of like just with the bass and sort of a Chess Records vibe. And then it goes into that arrangement with harmonium and bass, harmonica and vocal harmonies, that I arranged in a way it's much different harmonically, And so that was fun. With Billy Preston, it's the melody and the chords are very much the same, but I wanted a different horn section that was maybe a little funkier, sort of Sly Stone, Stevie Wonder, influenced more so than that circus vibe of the
right.
And so approached it that way, and everything's live, so I really wanted it to feel like you were at my place hanging out.
So the horns and everything is all done
together. No, the horns weren't live.
Okay.
All the band was live and vocals are live. We didn't have enough room for the horns and singers, so we had to do that as overdubs. It was too much. We had too much going on. But the whole thing was recorded in about a week. All the basic tracks were recorded in 4 days, and with that stuff, I might go from playing a piano part and then switch over to the organ, or play a guitar part, switch over to organ or Wurlitzer or whatever. Just do it right away and move on. Didn't do more than 3 takes. I had more songs on the song list that were probably 3 or 4 more songs that I thought would have been good for the album. We tried them out, saw how the band was playing it, saw how much they were influenced by the versions they knew of it. And
Yeah.
if it was too derivative of the original, and everyone couldn't just loosen up quick, in a natural way, in a couple takes, I just went, let's move on to something else.
Yeah. Yeah. And did you write all the horn arrangements and stuff?
No, I just did. The horn arrangements for the Nothing from Nothing.
Okay.
The rest were all of that was done by Jim Hoke,
Okay.
and then I did all of the vocal harmony arrangements, and then of course the rhythm section arrangements.
Yeah. Wow. And is this something, I mean, was this just like a brief segue for you where you said, hey, I want to do this full covers album? And I know you have covers on other albums too. Maybe I'm Amazed
Yeah,
and things
yeah,
like
yeah.
that. But was this just hey, I'm going to go do this and then come back and my next album is going to be originals? Or is this something
Yeah,
where you thought I might do a
yeah.
volume 2?
I didn't realize that there would be people that, dug it. I didn't know that it would be something that would get played on the radio. I wasn't sure that, I wasn't expecting what had happened with this project,
Yeah.
and that it's still alive on the radio after 3 months. I just did not expect that. So, I suppose that it's always possible if people like the way I interpret songs to do that again someday. But my intention is to continue writing original material.
Yeah. And was there a departure from songwriting at all for you during this process? Or did you kind of keep on business as usual with that?
I did. I kept on writing. There were things in my personal life that had made it difficult. My wife passed away, after being together for 26 years, and that was difficult. It made writing difficult for a period, and then I started just touring, and so I was touring so heavily during late 2018 all through 2019 that I wasn't writing quite as much as I wasn't finishing as many songs as I usually do. But I had a good basis for an album. I had, half of it written in 2018. Now, whether those songs will end up on the next record, maybe one of them, two of them, as I've continued to write. But we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. And your wife, Marla was her name, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And she did, I think I remember she was touring with you too one of the times I saw you live, but she was kind of a part of the whole thing, right? Helping out with merch and tour managing and things, right?
With the merch, not with the tour managing, but she helped out with the merch and when she could, when she was, once the kids were grown and stuff, that was really nice to be able to travel together.
Yeah. Yeah. I bet so. And now going out on the road. So was that kind of the coping mechanism off the bat is, hey, I just have to play music. That's my escape.
After a few months, I realized I needed to do what I do, and it had always been a part of my life that had, as much as I love it, as important as it is to me as breathing, it was still a difficult career to have with a family, because it's very few musicians can tour and have a wife and kids that still want to talk to them.
Yeah.
It's a hard job to be away all the time.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of, push and pull and trying to make compromises that were not necessarily best for either facet, not necessarily best for my career, not always best for my relationships. But I found a way to balance it and make it work on some level, even though it was difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. And you were able to be around plenty for your kids as they were growing up too, right? You still caught the Little League ball games and things like that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Pick them up at school, make them breakfast, drop them off, all that stuff. And then when, I had been sort of going between starting in '08, I moved to Nashville for 3 years and then came back, still had a place in Nashville for a while and came back to San Diego. And then when my son graduated, I don't know, 6 years ago or so, we moved to Nashville again. And it's been my solid base ever since.
Yeah. So that's your home. You're staying there.
Yeah. I mean, I think I love traveling, but it's such a creative place. There's a lot of really interesting folks that are doing all kinds of music.
Yeah.
It's so diverse, as it's not just one thing at all.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So when did you start really playing heavily? I mean, when were you, a professional out playing in piano bars and things like that? Was that early on?
Yeah. I think by the time I really started playing in jazz bars when I was 15.
Yeah.
And playing the standards. I mean, also doing, throwing in other oddball things every once in a while, besides playing, Fats Waller and Ellington and Cole Porter and Jerome Kern and Gershwin stuff. I was also playing, some boogie woogies or throwing in, throwing in Fats Domino thing or Little Richard or, even something like throwing in a Velvet Underground song or something that was just not what people expected. And, when I was 15, I also joined my first band, which was, older players, and it was sort of a 60s garage band vibe, where I was playing Vox Continental organ, which was a different thing.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. And then I guess I was about 16 when this guy Floyd Dixon really took me under his wing, and he was a boogie piano player, Central Avenue scene in Los Angeles since the 40s. He had written Wine, Wine, Wine and Hey Bartender and One Scotch, One Bourbon, One Beer, and a lot of these drinking songs. And he was like, dress up for the audience, and you can keep a set for this long, and taught me some of the basics, get paid in cash, all of those things. And so, I learned from a performer in that case, many people, but, he was, took me under his wing. We did shows around Southern California. And then when I was 17, a woman named Mae Axton heard me play, and she was the woman who wrote Heartbreak Hotel. And she called her friend Cowboy Jack Clement and said, you gotta hire this guy, you gotta hear him. So I did my first session in Nashville when I was 17. Wow. In the late 80s. And it was that opened my eyes to a whole new world. And at that point, I sort of felt, I always felt like I didn't fit in any particular musical style or scene or one particular group or another subculture wise. But when that happened, I sort of realized I was on my own independent adventure musically, and that I was going to go do all kinds of stuff. And the next year I was out with B.B. King, and that was the beginning of it.
Were you opening for him or playing with him?
I opened for him. Yeah, I opened for him on a West Coast tour, and then after that was Taj Mahal, and with Taj Mahal we would play songs together. Cool. Every night. I'd play piano, and we'd play four-handed piano, or he would play guitar, I'd play piano on a song or two, and we did that. And that was right when I got signed, and I think I was 19.
Now when you were signed, if I remember correctly, you were kind of marketed as a jazz artist at first, but I wouldn't necessarily think of you as a jazz piano player, sort of as you were just saying. I mean, and when I've seen you play live, there's elements of jazz, but there's the boogie woogie, there's pop, there's rock and roll, there's classical,
Yeah.
So when you talk about being on your own adventure, I mean, was that kind of freaky at first, being this melting pot of different genres? Who's going to listen to this? Who's going to like this? Where am I going to fit in? Or were you able to just embrace it?
I think I wasn't worried about creating a brand. I mean, that would have been really wise of me, probably.
Yeah.
But I was just wanting to create music,
Right.
and I wanted to create something that I would want to listen to, and if other people were into it, then that was great. And I had to walk this sort of fine line between recognizing that there was a need to have enough commercial success to be able to make another record and to continue to tour and to be able to fill venues, which took a long time for me.
Yeah.
But when there was also the other side of it, which was that I wasn't really that attracted to fame, and so I probably shot myself in the foot, a bunch. Certainly I had opportunities when I was young to cover my father's music, and just didn't. First of all, it just wasn't what that. As much as I love his songwriting and his performance, I just. That wasn't what influenced me. In fact, I think I was influenced by a lot of the same people he was influenced by, but that was the same way I found later in when I connected with Leon Russell and we wrote a lot together, was that we had a lot of the same influences. Yeah. And that was our connection, where all of these oddball piano players most folks don't know about unless you're a diehard, student of piano players of the 20th century. So, and it was the same thing. I probably could have done better. I know I could have financially, but I don't think I felt there was any. There wasn't a creative interest in it at the time, and there wasn't.
Sure.
I didn't think there was any integrity in it.
And you mean like that you had opportunities to sort of dress up like your dad in a way and redo the music?
Yeah, I don't think I had to go that far. It wasn't like when Hank Williams Jr. started, but it was certainly the opportunities to do an album of his music, to do a cover album of his stuff, they came from all over, from big labels. And, in my early interviews, that was off limits for 20 years. I wouldn't talk about him. I wouldn't play his music. Yeah. It wasn't until the last, 6 or 7 years that I started to embrace it because I had gotten to a place in my own career where I didn't feel like I had to prove anything. And I had started playing guitar, and I love playing that stuff on guitar.
Yeah. That's interesting, having something to prove. And I guess I always wonder that. I mean, it's not uncommon for a kid to get into the same profession as one of his parents. That happens all the time. But, early in your career, did you have to worry about like, oh, well, that's Jim Croce's son, so he's going to do this gig? I mean, was there some of that going on?
Still is.
Yeah.
There was then, there is now. I don't think people are, I don't know if most people are capable of separating me from him. They can't think of me, if they know who he is, without thinking of him.
Yeah.
And maybe that'll change in time with younger fans that don't know his music quite as well. But most of my fans are music fans, and so they know the reference points where I'm pulling from, at least a majority of them.
Right.
And so they know him. They also know all kinds of 60s rock and roll bands that you might have heard this or that. They know Alan Toussaint. They know.
Right.
they know these artists, some that I've collaborated with, like Dan Penn, and so in that way, it's like there's not really a way to separate,
Right.
And I've as difficult as that is on a personal level sometimes. I think I've mostly come to terms with it.
Yeah. No, I'm
You
sure
know?
that's difficult. And I wonder that with artists, who had a dad who did it or a mom who did it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm sure it's difficult. And well, if it's any consolation, I knew who you were first because I'm 29, and I eventually had to learn Leroy Brown and things like that for piano bar gigs,
Yeah.
but I didn't make any connection to who that was singing it. I just had to learn it through osmosis real quick, kind of
Uh-huh.
thing. But when I first saw you at I think it was Swallow Hill, probably 2013, 2014,
Mm.
and it was after that show that someone said, "Oh, well, here's who his dad is," and so I went and looked him up, and I said, "Oh, his dad was famous," but I
Yeah.
didn't know at first. So maybe with the younger generations, there is the disconnect.
Yeah. I
You
mean,
know,
either way, it's worth discovering his music,
yeah,
and and every once in a while you'll see someone that does, has the same profession as their parent, and you'll go, oh, I can really hear that connection. Um, but most of the time I listen without prejudice,
yeah,
um, but that was just partially because of my life experience.
sure, sure, absolutely. You've been talking about some of these collaborations, and you just brought up Alan Toussaint. Um, the couple CDs that I have at my house of yours are Cantos and 12 Tales.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and the rest is on Spotify because we're kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but 12 Tales, I think that's what you were supporting the first time I saw you perform,
Yeah.
or maybe the second time. And the story with that is really interesting because you have 6 different producers on that record, and
Hmm.
Alan's one of them, and
Hmm.
Greg Cohen. How
Yeah.
What was your thought process behind putting that together and keeping some sort of continuity while letting each of the producers do their thing?
Okay. So the continuity, again, it came from a couple factors. One was that it was me singing
Yep,
and playing
sure.
piano or guitar. The second was that we were recording live. you know
Yeah,
so you really hear what everyone's playing, and that live aspect of it actually makes it really hard for a producer to show their vision of something,
yeah,
because so many producers have a vision that requires pieces and putting everything together. It's a puzzle that they fit together, and then there's some producers that do all of that. The first person I that produced a song or 2 songs on that was Cowboy Jack Clement, who was the very first person who hired me, for a
yeah,
session.
yeah,
And so, that was a thrill. And once he signed on, there were other producers that were interested. And Toussaint was, I think, the second who came along. Now I had a for that album, which was a really hard album to make because I was traveling to all of those places where those producers work.
hmm,
So started in Nashville with Cowboy. Went to the second recording was with Kevin Killen,
yeah,
who had worked with Bowie and U2, and of course Elvis Costello for 30 years. Um, and and then after that went down to New Orleans and worked with Toussaint at his studio
yeah,
at his house. And I was also trying to release 1 song a month with different producers each month
yeah,
for a year. That
right,
was really hard. So there were times when I would get into a studio, record on a Thursday, maybe Thursday and Friday, mix either on that Friday or Saturday, and master it on Monday,
Yeah.
and then have it out on Tuesday. It was that fast that it would get uploaded, which was really hard.
Yeah.
There were a couple times when I didn't meet the deadline, but I did the
Yeah.
whole year. And so, Mitchell Froome was a really fun project. I've always loved his work as a musician and as a producer. And he taught me something really interesting because, I'd always played vintage instruments, always collected vintage instruments and amps and so forth. And never really thought about recording them except with the best possible miking that I could to make the instrument sound as great as it does. And he had this idea that great instruments have this innate greatness, and that's going to shine through no matter what. So let's figure out a way to make this sound like it's never sounded before.
Yeah.
That opened up all of these ideas for me about what different instruments could sound like, especially with the old stuff. And that was kind of our approach on that. But every session on that was fun.
Yeah.
And Greg Cohen, I had recorded half of an album, my first album, with him in New Orleans with Al Schmidt Engineering, who just passed. And the band was all Longhair's core group at the time, John Bodakovich and I'm trying to think of everyone. But anyway, it was a little outside the box, which I loved. I had learned about him through Tom Waits, and loved what he had produced for Tom Waits. 6 or 7 albums up to that point. I was so excited to work with him, and his idea of arranging and producing, I just loved. And so I was disappointed when the label thought it was just too outside the box for
really
them, and so I ended up, that got scrapped, and I still have the tapes from it, but that got scrapped, and I went to LA and ended up recording with John Simon and T-Bone Burnett for the first one. So that was really nice to be able to, after all those years, 20 some years at that point, almost 25 years, to be able to go, hey, let's do something. And initially it was going to be on my label before Compass picked up the album towards the end of the year. I said, let's do something. It's going to actually come out this time. And he was like, oh, let's do it. And so that was fun.
So you just kind of picked people that you really wanted to work with in that sort of a capacity.
I mean, there were a lot of I cast a broad net. Initially I think there were maybe 4 of the people on there were on my original list: Cowboy and Toussaint and Mitchell Froome, and then with the other 3, they were on my list as I was going through it, but it was really diverse, from Sergio Mendes to Tony Visconti. It was all over the map of different kinds of producers, different kinds of arrangers and sounds. Some were more engineers, some were more players,
Yeah, absolutely. And you were releasing it one a month. That's a very new music business concept. How did that come about, that you were going to do it every single month for a year?
Well, I have a label called Seedling Records, and I have digital distribution, which I set up early on, and I figured I'm able to upload stuff in real time. Why not try this? It's an indie record. It's going to be hard to get anyone to listen to this in the first place. And at least that was my perspective, and it was hard to to raise money for it. Initially it ended up being much more expensive than anything I'd produced before or been involved in producing. Since my first couple records, just because it was so much travel and so much working in New York and then New Orleans, then LA, just all of that. And I want every producer got, the same, so
Yeah.
it was, it was just I won't do that again. Not anytime soon.
Yeah.
It
That's a
was
lot.
just, it was like, I thought, okay, this is at least interesting enough that some writer will write about it.
Yeah.
And a few did. And that was positive,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I've realized I think we're mostly going backwards in your career, but on accident, right? But I mean, shooting all over the
Yeah.
place a little bit. We're going backwards. So, I think the next logical place to go is, what was the early childhood like? I mean, how did you first get into the piano?
There's photos of me, at the piano before I could walk, where I'm holding myself up on the piano. I played from the time I was very young, and I lost my sight when I was 4,
Yeah.
and it became solace. It became my home. It
Yeah.
became the safest place I had in my life,
Yeah.
and it came in a natural way.
Yeah.
I never thought I was like a prodigy or anything, but I love to practice. And I think once you start to practice and then you learn what to practice, and just talking to a friend who's a phenomenal player wanted to learn how to play some boogie stuff. And I said, well, just for the next 6 months, put your right hand, behind your back, or put it on
Yeah.
by your side,
Yeah. Right.
and just play left hand. Just play these lines, these walking lines, or chord cluster lines, or and I said they're really simple. It's just making sure that you don't need to think about it. It needs to be muscle memory. There's nothing that's intellectually complicated about that stuff. It's all muscle memory.
Yeah.
And so for me, once I realized that, muscle memory was such an important facet of piano and being able to execute certain things, I would just work on playing certain kinds of things again and again and again.
Yeah. Yeah. And did you, was that sort of a safe place for you once you lost your vision? Was, hey, this is something that I can do? You maybe weren't out
Yeah.
playing catch with the other kids. Was
Yeah.
that kind of an escape
Yeah.
for you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And do you have memories from before you lost your vision, or do you?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have memories of early childhood and yeah, I mean, I remember the last thing I saw in stereo, because I got my left eye back, but not my right. And I remember the last thing I saw in stereo was the cover of The Harder They Come. It had just come out. And I remember seeing that LP.
Yeah.
And that was the last thing I saw in stereo.
Wow. Was it sudden then, or gradually went away?
Um, it was pretty sudden. It happened over about a month period of time. I was very sick. It was a difficult situation. After my father died, there was a guy that was in my mom's life who was very abusive to me, and the result of it was the blindness. So I had been sick for some time, and I was away from home at that point. I was just about to turn 4. I was at a boarding school in Tucson, and I started blacking out. And then my mom came to visit me there and realized that I couldn't see, and went to the hospital, and I was in the hospital for the next 6 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
What was the sensation that you had when you first started regaining vision in your left eye?
Oh, it was such a subtle thing, and it happened so slowly over about 6 years. Like at first there was light, and then, well, there was this. My left eye didn't completely lose light, so to
Ah,
speak. There was some. I could tell that there was light, whether it was light or dark out, um, which was a good sign. But then over several years, that it was kind of like peripheral vision, where you kind of see something, and but that peripheral vision was in the center of my eye, and it's just expanded slowly, very slowly. And
wow.
so, as soon as I could, read again, because I learned to read when I was very young, I would hold it very close, still hold it close,
Yeah.
and look at this funny angle. Same thing with TV. I would get really close and try and tilt my head so that I could see the angle of it, where I could see the picture. Um, and as I got older, that expanded.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And so you got it back. Your left eye.
Yeah.
is-
Yeah. It's not perfect, but with these tinted lenses, which was a relatively new discovery, was that the tints could allow me to see contrast that in a way that I wasn't able to.
Okay.
Um, because it was optic nerve damage. It wasn't about my actual eyes.
Right.
So that it just took time.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you, I mean, do you go to the store and things like that? Do you drive?
I can, I shouldn't. I
Yeah.
can and I
Okay.
shouldn't.
Yeah.
Um, I'll if I need to get things and I can't have them delivered, then I will go for a short drive in the neighborhood, which I know really well, but I don't take risks like that any
Yeah.
longer.
Yeah. Sure. Sure. So musically for you, where, as this pandemic lifts and you start touring again, where do you see yourself headed in the next year or 2 years?
It's kind of interesting because there's part of me in that sense that's really still in last year, because everything from last year got pushed into this year, and then
Right.
consequently pushed into next year if it couldn't fit into this year.
Right.
Um, and so everything's booked through next year, maybe even the beginning of 23. So things that already existed, it's like I'm just playing the past for a minute.
Yeah.
I'm playing through the past for a minute, and then it'll catch up, and I'll start. During that process, I'll be playing new songs. I'll be playing things, obviously from by request, which I'm so glad came out this year, for both the reason that I said earlier, where it really sort of reflected on something that we weren't able to enjoy during the pandemic, but also the fact that I'll be able to add from those songs, and also everything that I'm writing and playing with. Some of the stuff that I've been practicing um, were things that some of the things were familiar, but I practiced and became better at. Some of them were less familiar, and will require that practice and muscle memory. I may add little pieces of them in improvisation here or there, but that won't show up really, I don't think, confidently for a couple years. And then
Yeah.
there's some of the stuff that I had never done before, that I wasn't familiar with, that I'm still learning the language,
Yeah.
not just the muscle memory, but the language, where I know that that'll take a little longer. That'll be like 4 or 5 years down the road. Those things will come out. And as that happens, I find really interesting places where things can kind of meld together. One thing I did, for example, was figure out there's with uh, East St. Louis Toulouse. It's by Ellington. You have these whole steps, right?
Yeah.
Ba-dum, ba-dum, right.
Yeah.
Basically, it's and it just goes up the scale. And then I applied these half step intervals with a raga in the same key, and found that they worked really well together, the same way that it would work well on half steps in say Caravan.
Yeah.
And so you can add this new flavor to it of like North Africa or India or whatever, just simply by playing, Ellington in the left hand and North Africa in the right. All of these
Wow.
things can like fuse together in a very natural way, and it can feel really soulful and melodic.
Is there a specific concept? Maybe it's a specific type of music or concept within that type of music that you want to evolve to a, on-stage performance thing in the next 4 to 5 years?
Oh, absolutely. There's a project I've been working on for 7 years, 7 years on my own, about a year and a half, 2 years now, with a group that came in that wanted to be a part of this, origin stories that I had sort of compiled, these 10 origin stories, mythologies, folklore, religion, science, history, and took all of these different perspectives of origin stories and started working with Anti-Ballas. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but they're a world beat group. They were a Daptone. They were like the first artists on Daptone.
Okay.
And even though they're very much a world beat music and there's multiple language being spoken, and the lead singer is from Nigeria, and the two guys that started the band are from Mexico City, and they got their start in Brooklyn. They end up getting pulled apart a lot early on by Amy Winehouse, who they played with, and then or many of the members played with, and then Sharon Jones and Charles Bradley and all of the Daptones, they became sort of a key part of the house band and touring band for Daptones. So when they can be together, they're doing more like Afrobeat stuff.
Wow.
And so the stuff that we started working on was the first song that we wrote together. I'm really happy with. It's pulling from all different cultures. It's the lyrics are in different languages, but it just flows. It's just really unique.
Yeah.
Definitely more in a world music place, but you can hear New Orleans in it. You can hear soul music, obviously, with the horns and the rhythms. It's really fun. Wow. And so that's going to be after my next album. The next thing after that will be with Anti-Ballas.
Cool. Well, I'm excited to see that in a live setting as well.
Me too. I think, the idea with with any luck, we'll be able to get together and actually, do a tour, at least go out for a month. It's my dream, and maybe longer, and be able to play in the United States, a few shows here, maybe 5 here and 5 in other places in the world.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for spending the time chatting with me. I sure appreciate it. And if you wouldn't mind, stay on the line with me for just 1 second, but I'll say goodbye to our audience. Thank you so much.
Hey, thank you.
All right, that's my conversation with AJ Croce. And I think this was one of my favorite conversations so far. There's been so many, and they're all great for different reasons, but I think this is one of my favorites so far. So thanks, AJ, for taking the time. Once again, my name is Andy Sito. I've been your host this afternoon. I put out a new episode of Middle Class Rockstar every Thursday. If you would take a quick second to rate and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen, it's a huge help. And if you'd like to take that extra step and help out in a monetary way, visit www.patreon.com/Andy Sito, SYDOW, where I put up exclusive content from some of these episodes, as well as songs I don't post other places, production videos, things like that. I get creative on there. So I'd love for you to be a part of my community for as little as $3 per month. I hope you have a great rest of your week, and I look forward to chatting with you again next Thursday. Thanks.